improve ourselves as negotiators. And without spending time, I would like to hand over to Professor Barney to take us through the course. Thank you.
So, Rolani, thank you so much. I've also been looking forward to this very much. Always good to talk to people from home. And even though we're living in Belgium at the moment, South Africa is still home as well. So in that sense, we're fortunate to be able to straddle the two sides of the world. Coming to Belgium 2014, when I had the opportunity, I thought, I'm going to be completely out of my depth here. I mean, this is a new world. This is these massive companies operating here in Brussels and other parts of the world. And the more I started working with these companies, the more I realized how much we as South Africans can actually contribute to the rest of the world in terms of how to resolve differences, how to resolve conflict. I know if you look around you back home, there's so much of it going on, but so much of that is noise. And if we can look beyond the noise and we start engaging honestly and earnestly and calmly about our differences, we can overcome those and actually generate some new insights, stronger relationships, and innovation from that. So on this side of the world, without sounding arrogant, they haven't got, I think, the skill sets that South Africans by and large have. And maybe because they haven't been challenged or tested enough for the past 70 years. Obviously, the wars were a major test for them. The financial crisis was, but since then, it's been a very peaceful environment, which is great. But I think also as a consequence of that, people forget about how to deal with differences. Belgium, for example, is the second most litigious society in Western Europe after Romania. People don't talk about their differences. They go fight it out in court, or they hide their differences. So that said, we can be proud of the sort of legacy that we have back home in terms of how to resolve differences and so on. Now, I have to apologize for something. We are compelled to work from home, so we're still in somewhat restricted here in terms of when we can go to the office. So I'm working from home. You might now and then hear some domestic noises, some cups and glasses and stuff. It's also a question of finding the right spot in the house where that is not already occupied by my wife and my kids. And then also making sure there's good connection. So please bear with me when it comes to that. All right. Let me, if I may, just give you an idea of what I'd like to cover in the time we have available. There. I'm going to talk a little bit about negotiation fundamentals. What are the current problems with negotiation science? I promise you I'm not going to bore you with theory, but the science around negotiation is in a mess. We always say negotiation is both a science and an art, but I think it's almost more art than science. And the science that there is, as you'll see, is very much culture-centric. It's not culturally diverse. It's focused on Western approaches to negotiation. So there's a huge gap in our knowledge about negotiation. And even the science that there is not clear. Talk about three major negotiation philosophies. I want to have a dig at getting to yes while I have the opportunity. And then what is it we do when we negotiate? Whenever I need you to help me achieve my objectives, if I need you to help me achieve my objectives, we are in a negotiation context. In other words, there's an opportunity for negotiation. But what happens when we actually start this negotiation? What is it we are doing? If we can understand that, it can open up quite a few new ideas and insights into what this beast is, what the nature of the beast is that we are engaging with, and help us understand it better as well. We need to understand its basic three-part structure: the problem, the process, and the people. And that is ever present, also in conflict situations, or simply when you're doing resolving agreements in the work environment or a conflict at home. That three-dimensional structure, people, problem, process, is always present. And understanding that and having that top of mind when you are in a negotiation or conflict situation can also help you focus and focus appropriately, because sometimes you have to switch focus from the one dimension to the other. And then what are the success factors in negotiation? How do we know that the agreement that we're about to enter into is one worth taking? It might never be optimal. We might never get everything we want. In fact, that might not even be healthy, because that leaves the other person with probably very little, if anything. But how do we know this is a deal worth taking? And if we understand the success factors, we can also then use that as a basis for planning our negotiation, for setting our goal for the negotiation. And then we're going to focus on the negotiation process. And that's where that case that I sent you will be used. Now we have one slight obstacle. 72 people have registered, and I put together the groups and sent the instructions as per the number of people who have registered. At the moment, we have less than 42 people, I think, participants. So hopefully more people will come on board. Otherwise, we'll have to find a way of reshuffling the case, or I might have to send you a fresh one and restructure the different pairs for the negotiation. But that might be a little bit of crisis management, but I'm sure we're going to get there. And then we'll do a case. I'm still, it could be the Texel case, it could be the Hyperwide case that I sent you, or another one that I'll send you in between, depending on the eventual structure or the eventual numbers that we have on the webinar. Okay, so can I ask you, before we continue, if you could please go to, let me just see here, open my screen. Is this visible? That question, how would you rate your negotiation skills? Christelle, Vincent, thumbs up, is it visible?
Not yet, your slides are still visible.
Then I just have to stop sharing the slides and share something else. Okay. Maybe just start again. There we go. All right, that's visible now?
Yes.
All right. So if you can please go to menti.com, MENTI.com. Tap in the code 59 17 433 5917433, and then just indicate how would you rate your negotiation skills. Do you regard yourself as an expert, above average, average, below average, or I suck at it? Where would you place yourself? Don't be too modest, okay? Okay. Most people say we average or above average. Okay. All right. Okay. Of course, you probably answered this question referring to formal negotiations that you've been involved in, but we negotiate all the time, sometimes without even realizing it. As I say, whenever you need somebody else to help you achieve your objectives, that is a negotiation situation. Whether or not you use that opportunity is a different matter. But when you do, that is actually a negotiation situation. So one of the important things about negotiation, of course, is to learn through reflection, to always think back about even the smallest negotiation event that you may have had, asking for a discount, sending something back to the store where you bought it from and asking for a replacement because the other one is damaged. Those are all negotiation situations. And it's always useful then to reflect back on that with us using the structures we're going to talk about, the people, problem, process structure, and say, how was the solution to the problem? How satisfied am I with this? How's my relationship with the people I negotiated with, to the extent that that is important? What about the process? How would I describe it? What was my strategy? What behaviors and tactics did I use? And it helps then to develop little rules of thumb, little sort of post-its for your brain or your heuristics to learn from it, to continuously reinforce the things that worked well and to work, of course, on the things that did not work so well. Okay, but thanks for that. The next question is this one. No, that's not one. Yeah, there we go. What advice would you give someone about negotiation? What advice would you give somebody about negotiation? Do's and don'ts. Do's and don'ts about negotiation. Know when to walk away. Your so-called best alternative. Listen to the others. Listen to the concerns. Don't make the first offer. Well. Okay. Don't take it personally. Imagine you're wearing Teflon under your shirt. Don't let it stick to you. Do your homework. Compromise. See the other party's perspectives. Be flexible. Don't take it personally. See the strategic situation from both sides. Don't go in with a fixed agenda. Strive to achieve a win-win outcome. We'll talk about that. Always know the minimum you're willing to accept. Never lose sight of your aim goal. Don't give up too quickly. Exactly. Do put in a counter offer or proposal. Allow parties to reach agreement. Listen with a win-win mindset. Determine your position. Listen more than you speak. Try to understand what the other person wants from the negotiation. Don't start by giving way too much before you even know what the other person wants. Listen before you judge. Don't get defensive. Work with the facts in hand, research the matter in depth, listen to what's not being discussed. In other words, your preparation. Know the market, seek a better solution for both, ask for more than what you will settle for, know your limits. Start with your best case outcome, your aspiration. Consider the bigger picture. Don't reveal your objectives immediately. Don't force your position. Listen, understand your bottom line non-negotiables. Never play hardball unless you know what the other person's strategy is or their base for negotiating. Don't reveal your real objectives immediately. I mentioned that. Understand the opposition and listen to them. Know what is the ideal outcome for you and the minimum you will accept. All right, then just one or two I'd like to come back to later on. It's first of all, compromise. What does that mean? Don't make the first offer. What does the science as it is tell us about that? And then the win-win terminology. I want to come back to that as well. Okay, great. Excellent advice. All of this is good advice. Some of it might be open to a little bit of debate, but thank you. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, let me stop sharing. Okay, that's my daily Maverick reading for the morning. So let me just... All right, so thanks very much. Can I ask you just, you can use the chats or just come live. What is for you the main difficulty in negotiating? What are the kinds of things that you find extremely difficult to deal with in negotiation? Does it relate to the issues, the problem, the process, or the people side of the negotiation? What for you is the most difficult and why? If you want to come live, it'll be even better. People, absolutely. Only people, not breaking through and people, when people reach a deadlock. Not to be kind, the people side. Corporate red tape, timing, politics, confidence, your own confidence, too eager to settle, people side again, people, all right. And my sense is that is probably going to be the dominant response, the people side. And strangely, that's the one side we neglect very often, especially when the going gets tough, when the heat is on. Telling people to take the other person's perspective when you're really frustrated and angry with them, you don't trust them, is a tough thing to do. The other thing that we neglect is the process. So a lot of what we're going to talk about today is process. And it's interesting that I think nobody actually even mentions the process, which for me is an indication of the fact that sometimes the last thing on our mind. We go into the negotiation thinking the process will take care of itself. But one of the most important forms of leverage you can have in negotiation is to influence the process or to be in control of the process, but not in a kind of a despotic authoritarian way. Hey, we're going to do it my way. But you can influence the process in a very, very soft but assertive way. And the one who has influence over the process has immense negotiation power. One example from this side of the world, for example, the Brexit negotiations. And the one thing that the EU did right at the start with Theresa May is they insisted on separating two aspects of the negotiation, of the breakaway. The one was what they unfortunately called the divorce agreement. Now, even referring to this as a divorce agreement already gives you a frame. Oh, this is going to be a terrible battle. Separating the divorce agreement from the trade agreement. And they insisted that it should be done that way. And Theresa May's government agreed. And that gave the EU immense control over the whole negotiation process. Okay. We don't know who ultimately emerges as a winner. That story still has to be told. It might be many years or even decades before we know, but certainly control of the process is critically important. All right. Please feel free to intervene, to disagree, to ask questions at any time, okay? And disagreement is fine. As I said, somebody said, don't take it personally. So if you disagree with anything I say, that's absolutely fine. It might be very interesting to have a debate. There's a lot of experience in the room, so please bring that experience to the fore as well. And if you feel you are less experienced in negotiation, not so great at it, don't hesitate to ask questions. There's an audience here that can collectively perhaps help find the answer to the questions you might have. So let me kick off with a quote from Michael Wheeler. Michael Wheeler was at Harvard. He wrote several books on negotiation, rated as he's a pracademic. So he's not just a pure academic. He's very much getting his hands dirty in the field of negotiation, and is regarded as one of the best faculty in their negotiation project, exactly because he brings more than just academic knowledge, but also actual practical experience to the field. And as you'll see, there's a big gap between theory and practice when it comes to negotiation. But this is what he says about negotiation. And he compares negotiation to a dance, to a kind of a dance that can flow in different directions. His quote is the following. Negotiation is a two-way street. We can't script the process. Whoever sits across the table from us may be just as smart, determined, and fallible as we are. All negotiations, large and small, are chaotic, since they take place in fluid and often unpredictable environments. Adaptability is imperative in negotiation from start to finish. So I think that really says it. it is a process that can go in any direction. As you'll see later on, you have to have a goal. You have to have an idea where you're heading to. But getting there may not be a straight line. It's not always a linear process. Okay. Now, can I just say something about the state of negotiation science before we move on? It suffers from what people call cultural centrism. Somebody coined this phrase, negotiation science is weird. It is Western, educated, industrialized, rich, and democratic. That's the model it is based on. We know so little about negotiation cultures outside of the weird framework. From Africa, from the East, although we know more about China because of interaction with China and Southeast Asia and so on, but we know so little about the negotiation cultures outside of the so-called weird countries. And that's a huge gap. And I think this is a challenge also for scholars on the African continent to compare these models with indigenous approaches to negotiation. What can we learn from one another? It's not the one versus the other. It should be and. What can we learn from each of these cultures that can enrich negotiation science and practice? 90% of the authors are from weird countries. The authors on negotiation, people who write books and researchers. 70% of them, as can be expected, I suppose, are from the US. 90% of the study samples are from the weird countries. And then the shocking thing is that 88% of the samples used in negotiation science use undergraduates, graduates, and MBA students to develop science. Now, there's nothing wrong with that, but realize that especially with undergraduate and graduate students, you're dealing with people with no real life experience. MBAs are different. But still, even there, what they are offered are simulations and data manipulated sometimes even to prove a certain hypothesis. And that means there's a massive gap between what the theory tells us about negotiation and what actually happens in practice. Perhaps certainly the best and one of the only studies ever conducted into real-world negotiations happened in the 1970s, 1978, I think. The piece was published by Neil Rackham and John Carlyle in the UK, where they looked at real-world negotiations, sales, labor, and commercial, and actually observed what was happening in practice. And they looked at behaviors per hour of negotiation and drew certain conclusions from that, focusing on negotiation behaviors. So that was real science, field work, but even that is limited, and it has not since been repeated. So there's a great need for researchers and others to learn from the field, to learn from practice, to say, does our theory actually apply in practice? What can we learn from practice to enrich our theory? So what am I telling you? I'm telling you that what I'm telling you is based on the science such as it is, deficient as it is, and some practical insights and experience, but often learning from the people I teach as well. The likes of you, the people I've had at Stellenbosch, at UCD Business School, now at Frederick and other business schools. That's where I learn a lot, from people's actual experiences. So again, I would implore you, please share your experiences. If I say anything that you say, but this doesn't work like this in my world, let's talk about that. It could be very enriching. I'm going to just take you through the different philosophies of negotiation, and then we're going to go into an exercise, our first exercise. I think there are three main philosophies or approaches, let's call it approaches to negotiation. There is the positional, the so-called win-win or principled model of Fisher and Urey at Harvard, and then the mutual gains approach. Now, again, this is not either the one or the other or the other. In practice, it's a mix of these that actually apply. Okay, but to briefly explain, a positional negotiation involves seeing the other person as an opponent, not necessarily as an enemy, but as somebody who is in opposition to you, who is trying to do what you do, get as much as get as much as they can. And of course, your thinking is that everything you give them is a loss to you, everything you take from them is a loss to them. Okay, it's a kind of a zero-sum attitude or mindset that one has. And your goal is to win as much as you can. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, nobody negotiates to lose, right? We negotiate to win. The question is, what does a win mean, and how do we achieve that? And that's where there are sometimes major differences. It is often power-based. The stronger your bargaining power, the stronger the position you can take. And maybe the quicker you can walk away, because you might have other alternatives, other suppliers, other homes to buy, other cars to buy. Okay. It's focused, that should not be focused, it's focused on winning your position. And generally the discussion does not go deeper than the demand that is on the table, on the positions that the parties have formulated. And typically what happens, especially in a business environment, also in collective bargaining negotiations, is each side separately prepares for the negotiation. Each has their own concerns, needs, and interests. Each has its own reality. The workers have theirs, management have theirs, or the suppliers have theirs, and the providers have theirs. The buyers have theirs. They each have separate sets of information, and information is the gold of negotiation. They then find a solution to their problem as they see it based on their information and take a position. And that position is then mandated to their negotiators. And when the negotiators then get together, what are they talking about? They're talking about their individual solutions to the hidden problems based on sometimes hidden information that each has. And then they try to solve that positional problem. And that's why often it ends in disaster. Okay. There is research, by the way. It's US again, but I know from own experience here, doing simulations also with MBA students and executives, that it's probably true of other parts of the world as well, that less than 10% of managers are able to reach optimal agreements. Less than 10% are able to reach optimal agreements. In other words, to walk away without leaving too much value on the table. For the rest, either there's no deal or there's a win-lose outcome with its own consequences for relationships, or it's a mediocre kind of compromise deal, 50-50 split or equal misery. Okay. And that comes from taking a position, bargaining about position, and using what we call distributive tactics, sometimes hardball tactics, sometimes even unethical tactics. Okay. Of course, the prime example of a positional negotiator would be a certain ex-president. Now, it might get you somewhere in some situations, but in the long run, it might not be the best approach in all situations. Then there's the win-win approach. I remember, and I think Javi Salia, my old friend, colleague, is also in the room. He'll also remember the years in the 1980s, just after Getting to Yes was published. This was the Bible for negotiation, because it's lovely to read. It's anecdotal. It's great stories. It makes so much sense. The problem is that book is not based on their own research at all. It is anecdotal. Some of the research that sort of underpinned their anecdotes came from Mary Parker Follett in the 1910s and 20s, from Walter McKersey looking at collective bargaining. So there's very little of their own science in there. However, the way it was packaged made absolute sense. And a lot of that still makes absolute sense. It's based on so-called principled bargaining, 7 basic principles that if you apply those principles, 4 principles, 7 steps, if you apply that, you can negotiate anything. Whether it's a hostage negotiation, commercial, political, doesn't matter. 4 principles, 7 steps, and the deal is done. But the book has since been criticized for being naive. And Roger Fisher, the chief author, also indicated, he said, we never wrote this book as an indication of how the world is. We wrote this book to indicate how it should be. It's a prescriptive book. We ought to do this. Now, sometimes that works. But where the naivety comes from in this book is that it thinks that there's competitive negotiation, positional negotiation is bad, collaboration is good. It's that typical cowboys and crooks kind of thinking. It's one or it's the other. Nevertheless, that said, there are a lot of things in that philosophy, the win-win approach, that is extremely valuable. For example, the prescription that you need to try and separate the people from the problem. The only problem is, what if the people are the problem? We don't have an answer to that. It says focus on interests, not positions. Excellent advice, critical advice. Be creative, brainstorm options before deciding, critical advice. Use benchmarks, standards, norms, external norms to justify what it is you're asking for. Excellent advice. But for the rest, one has to be careful to think that everything can be resolved through collaboration, and that trust is the basis of good negotiation. And that's something we can talk about, but which I would also challenge. It's not about trust, it's about something else. The third approach, the so-called mutual gains approach, was actually first mooted by two of the students of Roger Fisher, a guy called David Lax and James Sabinius, and they wrote a book in the 1980s called The Manager as Negotiator. The Manager as Negotiator. And later on followed up with a book called 3D Negotiation. Both are well worth reading, even though a bit aged at this stage or a bit dated. Excellent books. And they mooted this whole idea that there's room for both positional and collaboration, position or competitive and collaborative strategies in negotiation. It's not the one or the other, it is both. They talk about mixed mode or mixed motive negotiation strategies. And they say that both of these may be appropriate, not necessarily in sequence. You first collaborate, then you compete. You first compete, then you collaborate. But you may change your strategy depending on the issue. You have 10 issues. Some of those can be resolved through collaboration. Some can only be resolved through a competitive approach by taking different positions. You might be thinking that you're going to collaborate with the other side, but the other person is a hard positional bargainer. You might have to change your strategy. You have to think of it as driving a car. You have at least 5 gears, and which gear you move in will depend. Are you pulling off? Are you at speed? Are you overtaking? Is it uphill, downhill? What are the road conditions? Different conditions, different contexts, different issues, different people may require you to change gear from time to time. So they say the goal of negotiation is to create value and to claim value, to maximize the value available for distribution and to claim your fair share of it. The value maximization part generally requires you and me to work together, to collaborate as much as we can, at either as part of the process up to a certain point when we start dividing the pie and competing for our slice, or from issue to issue, collaborate on issues where we can collaborate and compete on issues that are competitive, that are fixed pie or zero-sum issues. The aim is not just mutual gain, it is to maximize our mutual gain, to maximize our mutual gain. Win-win is a bit of a misnomer. It might suggest to some a compromise. 50-50 is better than 0-0. So even if I get half of what I want, it is a win. Even if you get half of what you want, it's still a win. As long as I get above my bottom line, as long as you get above your bottom line, it's a win. And that's why win-win is a strange terminology actually to use. It's really about saying maximize our gains to the fullest extent possible, but not equalizing gains. It's about maximizing value, not equalizing value. And that's where the win-win terminology might lead us astray, to think it's about equalizing value. It is very strategic. In other words, you have to adapt your strategy as you go along. Okay, and the focus is on creating value and the fair distribution of value. And then an important difference between the Fisher-Urey approach and this one. Fisher and Urey would say it's about trust. You've got to build trust. Now, trust is an extremely rare commodity. It's extremely rare. And there's a saying around these parts that trust arrives on foot very slowly, but it leaves on horseback very, very quickly. So trust is something that is hard to find and even harder to keep once you've found it. The better option, I think, is to think not of creating trust, but being trustworthy yourself. Be the kind of person that others can trust without you necessarily trusting them. I think it's Stephen Covey who said in 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, be trustworthy, not trusting. So don't be naive just to accept everything they say, but show that you can be trusted. Show that you're competent, that you have beneficial intentions, but intentions that are not aimed at taking advantage of them, but benefiting them as far as you can. And show that you have integrity. So show that you're competent at what you're doing, you know your stuff, you know the field, you know you can negotiate, you can deliver on your promises. Your intentions through your words and your behavior shows clearly that you're here to help them by helping yourself, or helping yourself by helping them, and not taking advantage of them, and show that you can be trusted, that you have integrity. If that is present, then they tend to provide you with the kind of information that they will not otherwise provide you with. And they tend to want to become more collaborative because we are drawn to people whom we trust. And the other important thing here is to create interdependence, to show that we need each other, that the two of us, or however many parties there might be, are better able to satisfy each other's concerns than anybody else can. So even if it might be difficult, we need to find a way to work together. We are linked together. We are interdependent. And if on top of that, you trust me, then I have probably a much better chance of maximizing my own value. Any comments on those 3 philosophies? Anything from your side? All right, if not, let me then throw you in at the deep end. I'm going to, how many are we? 49, okay. 49, let's see, I think 16 rooms, 16, yeah. All right. This is a 3-party exercise. We're going to break into 16 rooms times 3 gives us 48. Christelle, Vincent, I think you will probably also be in the group. So if you don't mind, if I can ask you just to join the people in the room, you'll be divided into groups of 3. Into triads, and there may be then an overlap somewhere. If there is an overlap, I'll tell you how to deal with that. So I'm going to create the rooms, but I'm not going to open them yet. Let me give you the background to the exercise. I'll check your comment. It's an important one. I'll come back to that. Check the chats while you do the exercise. So this is the background, and it's a very frustrating exercise because there's so little information. And that is one of the problems with negotiation. As you'll see, we'll situate negotiation or define it as a decision-making process. And that means you need information, the best information you can get. But the problem in negotiation is we often don't have much information. We sometimes even don't have information about ourselves, about our side, about what we really want. what our real concerns are, what our options are. Never mind understanding information from their side because of lack of preparation or not asking questions of them. So we go in with limited information. All we can do sometimes is make assumptions to realize what we don't know and be alert then to the fact that we have to find this information by doing further research, further preparation, or asking them, or asking other people in the know for that information. So in this exercise, there's limited information, which means you have to make assumptions, but you also have to share your assumptions. You have to share your assumptions. If you go into a negotiation thinking this is going to be a long-term thing, they come in and say this is a once-off short-term thing, you are at cross purposes. So make your assumptions, discuss your assumptions, share them. The background is the following. The three of you, or maybe an extra person or two, you met at some networking function and you decide, both of you, or all three of you actually want to try something new. You want to become more entrepreneurial, start your own business, and you bring different skills to this startup that you have started investing in. You don't know one another. You've just met and you will get to know one another, okay? You bring different skills, IT skills, sales skills, marketing skills. Your focus is on the green energy sector, whatever that means. Okay, green energy sector. It could be wave energy, wind energy, solar energy, gas, whatever. Gas is green, as long as it's the right kind of gas. But you want to start a business in that sector. You have infrastructure. You've got an office. You've got systems in place. You do have a little bit of money that you got from friends, fools, and family for basic salary requirements. But this is still a business in a startup stage. There's a gap in your budget. And I'll show you the figures in a moment. A gap of exactly 121,000. I've got it here as euros. It could be rands as well, okay? So 121,000, whatever denomination you want to attach to that. You find an investor who's prepared to give you this money. Each of you are a separate little business, okay? So you have investors who are prepared to give you this money, but there are some conditions attached. Condition number one is you will only have 10 minutes to find an agreement about how to distribute this money between the three functions. This is not your money. It's not for your pocket. It has nothing to do with your shareholding. This is to help develop your part of the business, IT, sales, or marketing. You've got 10 minutes to decide on the distribution. After 10 minutes, if there's no agreement, the money disappears. It's gone. It's lost. Okay. The other condition is that the investor would prefer a three-way agreement between the three of you, as well as an agreement on the exact distribution. So if you decide the three of us will work together, you also have to agree on the exact distribution. How much will each of you get? It can be a percentage or an actual number. But, says the investor, sometimes, priorities differ. So if you can't reach a three-way agreement, a two-way agreement will also do. But there are two consequences, as you'll see. One of you will obviously be left out of this money. You're not out of the business. You just don't get your hands on this money. The money will go to the other two, and the amount that the other two can share becomes less. Okay, so let me show you. So there we go. It is, oh, what have I done now? I've deleted the slide. Okay, so there you go. The startup in the green energy sector, salary, infrastructure, costs excluded. So IT, sales, and marketing. If the three of you can agree to split the money three ways, then all of the money, the full pie, the full cake, 121,000 is available to you. But let's assume sales and IT say, look, we actually don't need marketing at this stage. then there's only 118,000 left. Marketing gets nothing, and the other money, the rest of the money, the balance, 3,000 is gone. It's only 118 that remains available for distribution. It may also be that IT and marketing decide we don't need sales at this stage. So sales will then not get anything, but the amount available for distribution between IT and marketing is limited then to 84,000. It's also possible that sales and marketing decide we don't need IT, but in that case, IT gets nothing then, of course, and the only amount that's available for distribution is 50,000. In each case, whether you divide it 3 ways or between 2 of you, you have to also agree on how much does each of you get, either a percentage or an exact number. This is all you know. So you will have to make assumptions and discuss your assumptions. You can negotiate any way you like, follow any strategy you like. You must try to get the best deal you can in the circumstances. Try to get the best deal you can under the circumstances. Maybe you want to take a picture of this just so that you can remember the division there. Who is who? Well, you'll go into your rooms. You'll get an invitation now to go into rooms randomly. The person whose name appears first is IT. The person whose name appears second is sales. And the person whose name appears last is marketing. If there are 4 people in the room, then the 4th person will also be marketing. So first name, IT, second name, sales, 3rd and 4th names, if there is a 4th name, will be marketing. Are there any questions? All right, Vincent, Christelle, you okay to join in the game? All right. I don't hear from Vincent. Is he, okay. All right, well, if Vincent's not there, we'll make a plan to reshuffle. That's okay.
I'll just write to Vince quickly.
Okay, but you know what? I see room 15. Okay, I'll have to just, okay. What I'm going to do, I'm going to open the rooms and then I'll just do a little bit of reshuffling here and there. Okay, Kobus, I'll put the slide up. I'll open the rooms in the meantime. You'll get an invitation. You can just go to the room. And then here's the slide again, Kobus. All right, so let's just see here, room 16. I'm gonna move you to room 16. Wagner, I'm gonna move you to room 16. Vincent, okay. Henning, I'm going to move you to room 14. Room 13. And Leon, I'm also going to move you to room 13. Okay. Graham, Anouk, usually there. Graham. Wachter, I can't seem to. Let me just check. All right, let's just see. Louise Swart, not joined. Anda, not joined. Okay. All right, Wagner, you're in room 16 now. If you, it's Robin. Okay, welcome back. Had to shuffle some of you to different rooms because some people couldn't join. So, but hopefully all of you got a bite at this exercise. Okay, a very straightforward exercise in a way, but I find it quite useful to explain three things. The one is, what is negotiation? What were you actually doing? I'm not talking about your tactics, behaviors, and that, but what is this thing that you were busy doing? What was the actual main goal here? Or rather, what kind of process were you involved in here? And secondly, it tells us something about the basic structure of negotiation, the three-part structure, the three dimensions I referred to earlier. And lastly, it helps us define the success factors in negotiation. So simple as it might seem, it actually shows us a lot. So I just want you to give me a quick idea of outcomes. Then we'll take a 10-minute break, and then we'll continue with debriefing the exercise. Can I just ask, is there anybody who did not reach agreement? Is there anybody who did not reach agreement? Let me just check on my screens here. Everybody reached agreement. All right, yes. That's a good start. Ah, Mfundo, sorry, you got disconnected. Okay. All right. Claire, you did not reach agreement. All right.
We did reach agreement, but yeah. The fact that there was a time limit to it definitely aided the fact that negotiation had to be reached or an agreement had to be reached.
Okay, now there's a very important message in that, Claire, and that's the effect of time. We know from the research that, again, as it is, that 80% of concessions are typically made in the last 20% of time available for negotiation. 80% of concessions come in the last 20 minutes. So people can use time tactically. You know, the typical example, you go somewhere for a meeting, they know you've got to drive back or fly back at 5 in the afternoon. They delay. And when there's an hour or two left, they start pushing you. Once they know that you really want this deal, they use time pressure to draw the concessions out of you. And of course, you can use it as well in your favor, but you've got to be very careful, because if people feel that they've been taken advantage of, that this was a false time deadline, then of course it can backfire eventually. But the thing would be to negotiate time. Say, well, why is it so important that we have to reach the deal by 4 o'clock, or delay your flight, or delay your departure, whatever. So be very careful if somebody has put a time limit on negotiation. Is it real? Or is it simply a tactic to force you into making concessions? Was anybody left out of an agreement?
No.
No? Everybody all included? All right. So far, so good. The last one, did anybody split the money in 3 equal proportions?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Yes. See mostly people saying no. Good. If it was split in 3 equal proportions, of course, it is an easy solution on the one hand. The question is that the best solution? That's win-win-win, but does it really satisfy the different concerns, the different needs? Because people's concerns might differ. Their interests might be, some interests are more important than others. It may be more important, depending on your assumptions, for money to go to IT or to sales rather than marketing. So if you just split it in 3 equal proportions, it might mean that marketing might be ecstatic, but IT says, we're not going to meet our objectives here. So be careful of an equal split. Yes, Esme.
Okay, sorry, I don't know why I got a missed call from this number, not to worry, thank you.
Okay.
And sorry, can I ask something?
Yes.
Do you mean that we split the IT sales and marketing into 3 proportions?
Yes,
Or
yes.
did we say all the money goes to everyone and then we split it? So everything we share in everything, although some people may not, sales will be not the stronger one getting the money.
But how would you share it, Santi? On what basis would you share it? How do you decide who gets what?
We decided that we all need our business to grow.
Sure.
And although everyone is not, sales is not very high on the list now because we don't really have a very strong product. We first have to go into IT, which will make the marketing stronger. And then, so our strongest salesperson will bring something else to the table next time because we need the money now. But we're sharing in our knowledge. And sharing in what we get from the money, from the IT, from the marketing.
Sure. But so you didn't put a figure on it, a number on it, how much goes
just
here?
Percentages, 50, 30, 20.
Oh, okay, that's fine. That's fine.
Yeah.
No, they're absolutely fine. So okay. It's not an equal split. You divided it according to what you believe, based on your assumptions, the main concerns would be here. That's absolutely fine. I'm just saying that if it was just so simply one gets, a third, it's an easy solution, but it's not necessarily one that satisfies the core interests of 1 or 2. It could be a temporary solution to say we don't have enough information. So let's start off with a third, and in a month or 2 we revisit this. Make sure you don't spend all the money, but we revisit this, and then maybe we can make a readjustment once we have the information. Okay, Anda, your hand is up.
Thank you. We had a third split between the 3 because one of our members unfortunately left the group, so it was only fair that we split it that way.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
I mean, we had considered the various departments out of IT, sales, and marketing.
Yeah.
We were leaning towards sales, IT for the better part, but once he left the group, we couldn't leave him out.
Makes perfect
agreement,
sense. Okay.
Majority, I think, and fairness as well.
All right. So Mfundo says it was him, he got cut off there. Mfundo, so they kindly left a bit of money in the pot for you there as well. Okay, all right. Okay, so I'll come back to your actual splits. And one of the questions I'm going to ask you is, whoever got the least amount of money, are you unhappy? I'm not asking, would you like to have more? Of course we want more. But are you unhappy? And if not, why not? What gave you the sense that what you got is fair, if that's the way you feel? Okay, so after the 10-minute break, I'll talk about that in a bit more detail. Also gives me time to just catch up with the chat. So I'll see you back, if you don't mind, in 10 minutes. Let's make it then at 20, let's make it 25 past. It gives you a few more moments. 25 past.
Thank you, Barney. Can I ask everybody can just stay on the platform, can just mute and take the videos off.
All right.
Thanks.
There we go. Okay, a couple of folks still. All right, so thank you for being back on time. Let's just continue debriefing the exercise. Let's just check here. All right. Now, Christelle, I see I can't share my screen. The host disabled participant screen sharing. So if I could just be made host again.
Vince?
Yeah, it's got USB events. Is the
Lizelle is out.
Events. Lizelle, is jy hier? Can you just make Prof. Barney?
I'm here. Give me a second.
Thank you.
Okay, she's got
I'll make
internet
you
problems. Yeah, that we go.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
There we go.
There we go. There we go. I'm glad we're not the only ones with internet problems on this site. All right. Okay. All right. So let me just use this exercise to illustrate a couple of things. What is it you were busy doing? Now, you were talking, you were communicating, exchanging ideas, making assumptions. All of that, of course, is part of negotiation. But come to think of it, you were actually making decisions. And decision-making lies at the heart of negotiation. In the real situation, you will have to make decisions before you go into the negotiation. From logistical decisions, how many people in my team, what time do we start? Do we formally record the session? Whatever logistical decisions there might be. You'll have to do some preparation and planning. What information will we provide? When will we provide it? What is our strategy for making concessions? What is our strategy going to be going into this negotiation? Who's on our side? What are their concerns? So many decisions you've got to take. But they also have to make a lot of decisions prior to getting into the negotiation. And during the process, you have to make endless decisions. And even post the process, you have to make decisions about implementation, about fixing issues that might arise from the agreement and so on. So that really is at the heart of it. Now, in the past, just going back to theory a little bit, people have approached negotiation from very different disciplines. Game theory, diplomacy, political science, probably linked to that, law, psychology, behavioral science, game theory, I think I mentioned. So anthropology. And that's part of the reason for the mess we're in terms of the theory of negotiation. Everybody comes at it from a different perspective and looks at it from a very different discipline. But the one, I think, common thread that I've seen through all the signs that there is looking at negotiation as decision-making. So if we could take that lens and say negotiation is a decision-making process in which we engage other people to meet our concerns, needs, interests, and so on, through a mechanism of give and take. In other words, to create and claim value. That is the definition I want to suggest works best as an understanding of negotiation. There are endless decisions. There is no uniform definition of negotiation currently. If you open any book on negotiation, any piece of research, people have their own definitions. But this one, I think, consolidates a lot of the wisdom that is out there. And for me, is closest to the reality of negotiation. But let's just unpack this. And I'll do this with reference to the exercise you did. It is a process. In other words, it's something we can prepare for, something we can do some planning for. There's a difference between having a plan and planning. You can't really have a plan for negotiation. That quote from Michael Wheeler that says, you know, it's sometimes chaotic. You can't plan everything from beginning to end, but you can have a plan. And your plan can include, what is my goal? What information do I disclose and when? What concessions do I make and when? That can change depending on the flow of the negotiation, how things turn out. So you can have a plan, you can plan, but not have a fixed plan. But it's also something that can either be advanced, helped to move forward by using certain tactics and behaviors that can help that process move towards your goal. But it may also be that you do things that actually hinder your achievement of the goal. Wrong tactics, wrong strategy, wrong behaviors can, of course, put the process off track. So it's a process. And as I said earlier, the one who can influence or even lead that process has enormous power in the negotiation, not to be abused, but to be used to achieve your objectives. What we often forget about is that if it's about decision-making, what we want is the best decision we can make under the circumstances. We want to maximize our value. And for that, we need information. information about us, what we care about, the environment, the obstacles that we face, the opportunities we have, all of that, but also information about them. Why about them? Why should I take their perspective? Because if I want to change their minds, I need to know what is on their minds. I have to really try and anticipate what the information they might have, what their assumptions might be, what their goals might be, what their concerns might be. I need as much information as I can get to improve my decision making. And the more information I have, the better prepared I will be. Or at least I will know what I don't have and which I have to get. Okay, and I'll talk in a moment about the implications of that, how we can improve decision making. But the other important point here is not just about maximizing our information. It is also about being aware of the fact that we are not so great at making decisions, especially not under pressure. There's a lot being written about biases and heuristics that influence our decision making. Now, the human being can't live without that. We've survived with certain psychological biases and traps for ages. Sometimes they help us, but very often they hinder us. We can't get rid of them. We can actually only be aware of them and try to manage them. And these biases also don't come along in single file, one at a time. You know, now it's groupthink. Tomorrow it's the expertise bias. The next day it is risk aversion. They usually come together in numbers. They hit us at the same time. So it's impossible to really say, I'm going to manage these biases one by one. We have to be aware of them. And the only way we can really try to limit their influence is to maximize real information. Okay. The number of books out there that I can recommend, of course, the most well-known probably is Daniel Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow. If you haven't read it, it's not an easy read, but I think it's compulsory reading, not just for negotiation, but for decision-making generally, for leaders generally as well. Thinking Fast and Slow. The other is a book by Dan Ariely, A-R-I-E-L-Y. It's called Predictably Irrational. We think we're smart, but actually we're not. And then there's a new one, which I really enjoyed. It's called, it's by Sibony, S-I-B-O-N-Y. Even Daniel Kahneman praised the book. It's called You're About to Make a Terrible Mistake. You're about to make a terrible mistake. Talks about these biases, their influence on us, and what we can do to try and manage them. Various techniques that he has there. Okay, so it's about decision making with the implication that we need as much information as we can, but then we also have to be careful about the influence of biases in our decision making. We sometimes think this is a very rational decision, forgetting that the origin of this decision was probably emotional, could have been influenced by factors that have nothing to do with the reality, but are the result of biases. It's about engaging other people. And I think earlier what came out of your chat is that this is for most people the most difficult thing to manage. But we often think about the people as those on the other side of the conversation, when in fact sometimes the problem is on this side of the conversation, or a bigger part of the problem, or at least part of it is on this side of the table. I don't feel confident in this negotiation. I'm out of my depth. I don't know how to, I'm not properly prepared. I'm feeling tired, highly emotional, stressed. I'm filled with wrong assumptions about them. I focus on them instead of their behavior, or I draw conclusions from their behavior that they're bad people instead of saying they're just normal people doing bad things. So I could be the problem here. And we have to be aware of that. We have to know ourselves going into that negotiation. We have to know when is the best time for us to negotiate during the day. How do we energize ourselves so that we are sharp? Make sure there's enough oxygen and glucose flowing to our brain so that we can actually think and not negotiate endlessly without a break or negotiate through the night. How do we communicate with them? How do we deal with their and our emotions? What kind of relationship do we want with them, and how do we build that relationship? Because the relationship is critical for the success of the negotiation or for the success of the deal. if the relationship is poor at the end of the negotiation process, the agreement itself is in danger. It might not be sustainable. And there's also a risk that it might not be repeated in future. Okay. And then what is the goal? The goal is to meet our interests. I want my interests to be met. Nobody negotiates to lose. We all negotiate to win. The question is, what is that win and how do we achieve it? In the exercise you did, you had two options. I said, do the best deal you can for yourself. Now you can say, well, I'm IT. If I look at the numbers on the side of the pyramid, I'm in the pound seats here. I'm the strongest here. Clearly, this is an indication from the investor about where most of the money should go to. And then you bully your way into an agreement here and you emerge as the victor. The others are losers. There's nothing wrong with that. However, there are consequences. For example, if you need the help of the other people tomorrow, you might not get that help, or they might get you back, because the victim tends to become the aggressor. And it might not be good for the business overall. It's good for you, but not necessarily for the business. So taking that positional negotiation approach based on your power, given those numbers, is okay, but not necessarily wise. But I think most of you have said that this is not just about me, about IT, sales and marketing. It is about me, but it is about us too. Why is it about us? Because I can't achieve my objectives, satisfy my concerns without them. So I need to look after myself by looking after them. I have to say, what are my concerns? What is really important for me here? And what do I have to be assertive about? But how do I at the same time put myself in their shoes, take their perspective to find out what are their goals, their concerns, and see if I can help them so that they can reciprocate and help me. It's not about being kind to them. It's about satisfying your own interests by satisfying the interests of the others. Somebody once referred to this as selfish altruism. Selfish altruism. I look after myself by looking after you. You have those options. Now, in this exercise, the latter strategy of looking after myself and the others is, of course, in the longer term, probably going to be the best one because there's an ongoing relationship. It's probably going to be best to achieve the goals of the business. Okay. And then finally, it's through give and take. And this is where we have to deal with a dilemma. People refer to it as the negotiator's dilemma. When do I give and when do I take? When do I create and when do I claim value? When do I work with you to make the proverbial cake bigger? And when do I claim my share of it? And the dilemma is that by working with you to maximize value for both, to get mutual gains for both of us, I need to disclose information to you about some of my deepest concerns, which puts me at risk because you might take advantage of me. But if I don't disclose it, we probably won't achieve the objective of making the pie bigger. So yes, I want to tell you certain things about what I really care about here and what my priorities are, but I know it's a risk. So by disclosing that information, I might limit my ability to claim my fair share of the pie because you might take advantage of that information for your own benefit. Okay. On the other hand, if I go in there claiming and I limit information so that I can claim a bigger share of the pie, I limit the opportunity for making the pie bigger because information is being withheld. That's a dilemma that there is no recipe for how to manage it. It's about being aware of it and then taking it step by step. Okay, the main sort of saying we have in negotiation is you go slow to go fast. Don't get rushed into an agreement. As you'll see later when we talk about the process, take it step by step. Make sure that you get all the information you can. Make sure you understand the issues. Make sure you know what the options are before you get in and roll up your sleeves and you get into the value claiming, the bargaining phase. But that will become clear later on. Any questions about this definition from anybody? Does it make sense to you? Okay, but it gives us a frame. So next time I'm negotiating, I'm going to make decisions. Am I going to negotiate with them? What about, when do I walk away? What's my bottom line? At least it helps us frame, know what it is we're dealing with, okay? What else comes out of this? Well, let me first, hang on, let me first go here. How can we improve decision-making in negotiation? Here are a couple of ideas. We are very used to brainstorming solutions, right? You go to a brainstorming session, you say, what's the problem and what are the solutions? But what we don't do is brainstorm questions. What are the questions I've got to ask going into this negotiation? Questions about myself, about the market, about my product, about who's on my side, what they care about, what I care about, questions about them. And it helps to just jot these down. Use a pen and paper, use a whiteboard, write on a glass window, use your laptop, but just generate questions. Why? Because your brain tends to answer only the questions you ask of it. If I say to you, what's 1 and 1, you say 2. You're not going to volunteer further information. So by expanding the number of questions we should be asking, we also expand our brain's attention. Because then we will know what information to gather, but we will also, very importantly, know what information we don't have, which we need to get from them by asking questions, for example. So brainstorm the questions. You can use this in conjunction with preparation templates. If you Google negotiation preparation templates, you'll find an endless number on the internet, and you can use those to design your own. For simple negotiations, in-house negotiations, or other everyday kind of negotiations, and more complex negotiations, whether in-house or external negotiations. So have these templates, because they prompt the questions, they prompt your attention. I must think about this. I must ask them about that. Okay. There's one company I know that I worked with in a different context, and that is what they do is they have an internal negotiation strategy. And it involves things like mandating. How do I get my mandate? Who do I turn to if I need my mandate refreshed? What resources are available to help me prepare and plan for this negotiation? How do we select a team for negotiation if we use a team? What are the values that guide us in our negotiation? And very importantly, how do we create feedback loops so that everybody who's been involved in negotiation, especially with external players, stakeholders, can feedback their experience into our system so that we can continuously learn from that. They provide negotiation training, but they also use standard preparation templates for different situations. And what they tend to do is, if they deal with a supplier, for example, for the first time, they will send a blank preparation template to the other side and say, in preparation for our meeting a month's time, this is the template we will be using to prepare for our discussions with you. You are welcome to use it as well. Of course, you have to make sure it's blank and not already filled. But if you were to receive an email like that, what would your reaction be? You're not going to say, well, delete. You're going to take it seriously because these people are coming prepared. Now, I've heard people say, why would you do that? Well, you'd rather negotiate with somebody who's well prepared than with somebody who's not. Okay. Use a devil's advocate. If you're preparing for a negotiation, you think you've done your preparation, run your thinking past somebody who can be critically constructive. In other words, who can give you the thumbs up for the things that they think seem to be going okay, to be argued well, or give you whatever feedback they think is positive, but also to punch holes in your thinking, in your argument, in your proposals, and so on. That really helps stimulate more questions. And then if it's a really important negotiation, use contrarian teams. And the team could be one-on-one. So you play the role that you should be playing in the actual negotiation. You get somebody else who has the time and the willingness to do so, to assume the other role and actually have a negotiation experience, an exercise. It doesn't have to be the full thing. But by interacting with the other side, not only do you realize what information is missing, You can also get feedback from the other people, because you don't often get an opportunity for people to hold up a mirror and say, hey, this is who I experienced just now. I think this worked well, this didn't work so well. You look very nervous, you look very insecure, you have too many arguments here. So that really helps with your preparation as well. Okay, now I want to do a quick exercise with you. Just 3 very simple, straightforward questions. All the information you need is right there. And this is not about how smart you are. This is about how your decision-making is under pressure. So I've got to set my clock here, and you will have 25 seconds to answer all 3 questions. Okay, it's a long time for 3 questions. But the main thing is you are not allowed to change your answers. So write it down, put it in your mobile phone, put it on a document, a Word document or anything else, or just write it down, your answer to these 3 questions. But once you've written down the answer, you are not allowed to change it. Okay, so your first response is the one that counts. So 3 questions, and your time starts now. Okay, 5 seconds. All right. Okay, so here we go. Plane crashes on the border between Spain and Portugal. Where do you bury the survivors? In Spain, Portugal, or their home countries? Of course, you don't bury survivors, right? That's a criminal offense. Some months have 31 days, others have 30. How many have 28? All of them. How many animals of each type did Moses take with on the ark? No, it wasn't Moses, it was Noah. So let me see. Where do I stop sharing? Just by thumbs up. Who got all 3 right? Ah, Christo, well done. Anybody else? Claire, you as well. Good, 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 good. Okay, all right. Who's got 2 right? Oh, a couple more. All right, and I think let's leave it there. Okay, so this is about what happens in the brain, that we, especially under pressure, we jump to conclusions and we miss important information. We see animals, arc, and we jump to 2. That is the heuristics and things that operate in our brain, because we are prone to quick thinking. We want to think as quickly as possible by digging into our memory, not using extra energy for thinking, and then we come out with the right answers. And especially under pressure, time or emotional pressure, the risk is that we will succumb to poor decision making. So that is why maximizing your information, being aware of some of the biases and things that can creep into our thinking, we can already improve our decision making. If on top of that you use things like a devil's advocate, brainstorming questions, preparation templates, you should be able to go a long way towards thinking more rationally, even under pressure. But if there's pressure, remember, go slow to go fast. Take time out if necessary. Don't just respond in the moment. Think about your response. Pinch yourself if you have to, because we tend to just be reflexive and jump in the moment and not think clearly before about what it is we do. All right. So thank you for that one. Let me just take this a step further. The exercise also told us about the structure of negotiation, the people, problem, and process aspects. Okay. The problem is what it is we're negotiating about. And that's not just about the position. That's about the real issues, the underlying concerns, the why. I know what your position is. I know how you want to solve it. Your demand tells me this is your solution. I want to know why you ask for that. What is supposed to be satisfied if you get this? Yes, you ask for money, but money is a proxy often for underlying concerns. If I understand those concerns, I might be able to satisfy them without giving you the amount of money you need. I could give you added value that is low cost to me, but high value to you without giving in to your demand for more money. So we have to get to the real issues. What is under the surface? The why. As far as the process is concerned, it's about how do we deal with the issues? What kind of goals do we have and how do we get there? What tactics and behaviors will help us reach our goals? So how do we manage this process and lead this process towards the goals we have? And then how do we interact with the other side? Who are they? Who are we? Are there any barriers between us and them? You sit in your office, you prepare. Or you sit at home and you prepare. And everything is so rational. You've got all the information there. Your expertise is beyond question. And then the process starts. And suddenly people issues creep in. And then all your preparation goes out the window. Because now we're in this, we get into a stage of conflict arousal. They are so obstinate, they don't want to listen to us, they interrupt us all the time, they are stupid, they don't understand our arguments, and then we lose track, and it becomes a conversation of the deaf. Okay, so all three of these need to be managed, and that is difficult for the human brain to do. We are not able to hold more than one thought at the same time, or at least focus on more than one thought at the same time with the same amount of attention and energy. The brain does not have the capacity for it. So we have to spotlight those aspects that need to be spotlighted at a particular moment. Assume you're negotiating, your negotiation is a play in the local theater, and you're one of the actors on the stage. From time to time, you have to imagine that you're sitting on the balcony as a member of the audience, observing yourself, and just saying to yourself, it's like being a fly on your own wall, saying, where's my focus at the moment? Where's my attention? And I got so deep into the issues that I've forgotten to check my process, my preparation, to go back to all my careful planning. Am I so stuck on the issues that I've lost track of them, of our relationship, of how they're feeling? I no longer observe them, pick up the cues that they send me about their own frustrations or anger or whatever the case might be. And then I might have to just take a step back and say, let me just switch focus. Let me step away from this argument about who's right, who's wrong, my demand versus your demand. Go back to my preparation, maybe take a break and recover a little bit. Or go back and say, hey, you know what? I'm really sorry about what I said there. It just slipped out. I didn't mean to accuse you of lying, just to rebuild that relationship as well. So we have to force ourselves to check, is our focus still where it should be, or do we have to adjust it for that particular moment? Okay. And then finally, for the moment, the exercise also tells us something about the success factors in negotiation. I refer to it as the negotiation balanced scorecard, for want of a better term. It's about people, process, and problem. And this order is deliberate. It's always people first. As you see when we talk about process after a coffee break, it's always about people first. Establishing relationship, creating the right climate, building relationship, ensuring good communication and flow of information. Then it's about the process. Bargaining over how to bargain, deciding on how we're going to negotiate. What are the basic ground rules? What do we tackle first? What's on the agenda? How do we ensure that the process is fair or perceived to be fair before we get to the problem? But typically what we do is we go straight into the problem. Okay. And then we forget about the other two. So as far as people are concerned, we want as much open communication as we can get, transparency. But in negotiation, of course, there is this disclosure dilemma. If I tell you certain information, you might take advantage of it. But if I don't tell you this information, we might not maximize value. And that's a dilemma you've got to try and manage. If you know the people well, it becomes easier. If they trust you, if you are trustworthy to them, they will probably feel more comfortable and safe disclosing their concerns and their priorities to you. But there are other ways of getting that kind of information. For example, by making a proposal and asking them to criticize it. They might not tell you why they want certain things, but they will always tell you why what you offer them is not good enough. And from that answer, you can gather an idea of what's important to them. Okay. But the idea is to ensure maximum flow of information about the real issues, the real concerns here, not about your secret information, your bottom line, and so on. So it's transparency, but not total transparency. Somebody referred to it as being translucent. You don't tell them what your bottom line is. You don't tell them that if you don't get this deal, you're in trouble. You don't have a good walkaway alternative, because that information can be used to hurt you. You don't disclose everything, but you don't lie about it either. You don't tell people that you've got an alternative if you don't, because if they're sharp and well prepared, they might know that you're not telling the truth, or they can just pick it up from your body language. And then two things happen. If you lie and bluff and they pick it up, first of all, you lose power, because power is so much a perception in their heads about how powerful you are. And that goes beyond your resources. It's about your power as a person. And the second thing is your reputation gets damaged, and that immediately makes you untrustworthy in their eyes. So how do we communicate? What questions do we ask? What information do we disclose and when? And then how do we build relationship? How do we ensure that there's respectful engagement? And this is irrespective of culture. The two things we really, really need is to be heard, and I'll come back to that. And the second one is to be respected across cultures. So how do I ensure that I show respect? And that might mean becoming more acquainted with particular important cultural practices and norms on the other side. Without becoming them, I need to understand them, their thinking, their mandating process, and so on. And the kinds of things that I should and should not do if I want to build relationship with them. But very often we neglect the importance of establishing that connection, that relationship, because it's, sort of show me the money, time is money, we have to get to this outcome as quickly as possible. Instead of saying the relationship is more important, because the agreement is not the end. It is only the beginning of a future relationship that is supposed to sustain this agreement and hopefully ensure a repeat of this agreement. And then there's the process side. Of course, there's the planning and the preparation and all of that, but what we actually want out of a process is a sense that we've been treated fairly. And this is intuitive. If you think back to any recent negotiation you've had, I said, if I would ask you, what was the outcome? You might remember it. I said, how was the process? Oh boy, the result was great, but a horrible experience. People remember the process. Or you know what, the outcome wasn't so great, but I really felt treated fairly. One of you commented in the chat box that I got the least, but I was happy, I was involved, and we looked at the bigger picture. That sense that I was involved, I had voice. I wasn't agreed with necessarily, but I was heard. Never ever neglect the importance of making people feel that the process was fair. What we do know is that very often people are prepared to make substantive concessions in return for a sense that they've been treated fairly. But if they are treated unfairly, and even if the outcome is good for them, they might not be so happy anymore because they remember the way they were treated in that process. And then there's the problem. What kind of solution do we want? We want a solution that meets our core concerns. What are my real interests, the real deal breakers, the things I really care about here? My needs, interests, and concerns, things that are informing my demands and my positions. I want something that's as close as possible to my best case scenario, my aspiration. And setting my aspiration is an art. I must aim high, but be realistic. If I buy something, I must buy for as little as possible but be able to justify what I'm asking for, base it on something, not just suck it out of my thumb. If I'm selling something, I want to sell it for as much as possible, but again, be realistic. Anchor it on some sort of external norms that you can justify. You might not get your aspiration, but it serves as an anchor. Okay. If I really want your house, and you sense that I really, really love this house, and that perhaps this is one of the better houses that I'm looking at the moment, and you had your house valued recently at quite a high value, then you would say, well, see, you can like the house, this is the price. So I would then be drawn to that anchor. And in that situation, it might be good for you to make the first offer, because you know that I want this house, you know what my needs are. You have a high value that you place on your house, but you can also justify it. You might not get it, but I will naturally be drawn to make a new offer that is closer to your norm than the one I originally had in mind. Okay. But if I don't know what your concerns are, I don't know if you're looking at other houses, I'm not quite sure what the value of my house is, I just know I like it very much, then it might be best to let you go first. Okay. So I also need to always ask myself, when do I walk away? Yes, I've got my aspiration, but what is my bottom line, my reservation value? When do I walk away from this negotiation? And secondly, if I walk away, where do I walk to? Where do I walk to? What is my solution away from this table? Or, as Fish and Yuri call it, what's my best alternative to a negotiated agreement, a baton? Okay. Which is not a really good term, because my next alternative may be an agreement. So best alternative to a negotiated agreement, what if my best alternative is a negotiated agreement? So it's a bit of a nonsensical term, but I like the term solution away from the table, or just my plan B. And my plan B might be, if I can't get your house at the price I can afford, I will stay in my rented apartment for now, or I'll look at another house that I also have an eye on. And then what I also want is a fair solution. Whatever I get must be fair. But this is not intuitive fairness, as is the case with process. This is measurable fairness. I can measure the outcome against some sort of standard. So let's go back to the exercise you did. Let's see if you can tick the boxes. Does anybody have a problem with the first two? With the communication, with the relationship, with the process? Do you feel treated unfairly? Is anybody continuously interrupted or felt out of the loop? Nobody, it seems. And what about the solution? What about the solution? Okay. And this is why I asked you, if you got the least amount of money, how do you feel about it? And I don't think anybody's going to say to me, well, I got the least, but I'm very unhappy. Provided you understand why you got what you got. Provided you understand why you got what you got. Either because you looked at the numbers on the side, you say, well, there's a ratio, let's use that. Or let's use that as a starting point and then redivide as we think deem fit. Or you used good argumentation, reasons for deciding to split it in 3 unequal proportions. So even the ones who got the least will probably feel, of course I would have liked more, but I understand why I get what I get, or why I got what I got. Okay, so let me just see your chat here. Yeah, absolutely. Walking away is not just based on monetary values, it also relates to other things like absolutely the company culture, the values. For example, when you're looking at B2B sales, you really want this customer, you really want them. But you realize that, well, the deal is the beginning of a future relationship with them. Is it better to have that long-term agony of being tied to them, or the short-term pain of losing them? And that's your call, of course. But this is, reminds me always what I think George Bernard Shaw said: never wrestle with a pig. You both get dirty, but the pig loves it. So be very careful. Sometimes you have to walk away because of that. I'll come back to some of your questions in the chat, but just any comments on this? Any comments? So the scorecard is a way of saying, okay, before I accept this deal, let me just go through that. Have we disclosed as much information as we could? Is there not more information that we could perhaps disclose that can improve our outcome? And what you can use there is the technique of what we call post-settlement settlements. So you have an agreement and you agree, well, okay, that is our agreement, but we have some time. And I sense that if we thought about this a bit more and we gathered more information or shared some more information, we might actually be able to improve on this. And if we can improve, then that improved agreement becomes our new deal. If we can't, the existing deal is our deal. So you have a common BATNA. It can't get worse than this. Okay. As far as the process is concerned, is there anything we can do to leave a sense of fairness behind? Maybe we can make a last small concession that means a lot to them, that's low cost to us, that at least makes them feel they've won something. That might give them a sense of fair play. And what about the outcome? Is this the best deal for us? Should we not revisit it, rethink it a little bit? Okay. Maybe we can improve the value for one without detracting from the value of the other. Or maybe we can improve value for both. And if you can say, yep, I think I can tick these boxes, well, that's the deal for you. It's better than your alternative. It's close to your aspiration. It's better than your bottom line. It meets your core interests as best as possible. And you can use this also, as you'll see, as a goal. Say, in negotiating, I have goals around each of those three elements. And then you add some flesh to that. What does this exactly mean? What kind of information do I need? Do I disclose what is my aspiration? What is my bottom line? What is my alternative if there is no deal? Okay. Any questions? Because what I'm going to suggest, Christelle has sent me the names of people who are present. So I'm going to send you fresh instructions for a new case. So whatever you read about the case I sent you, you can ignore that. I will send you instructions for a new case during the break. And then after the break, we're going to just briefly talk about the negotiation process. Then you'll have time to prepare your role. And then you're going to go into a negotiation. It'll be a one-on-one negotiation, maybe with a bit of overlap here, two-on-one here and there. Any questions? Just post them in the chat. If there's anything that I say that you disagree with, please feel free to mention that as well. All right. So let's break. Can I suggest we take a break? It's now, Christelle, I think, yeah, it's now
10 past.
10 past 11 on your side.
Yeah, almost. You want a 10-minute break?
Yeah, let's make it 10 minutes till 20 past, and I'll send you the instructions, and then hopefully we can. The idea is not to necessarily rush into an agreement. The idea is to become acquainted with the negotiation process. Okay. All right. I'll send you the instructions in the meantime. So I'll see you back at 20 past.
Make their apologies.
Okay, that's
They had to rush off.
All right. Okay, I'm going to put them into groups in a moment, so we might have to reshuffle the groups again. Okay. All right. So let me just lead in. This is going to be a fairly quick exercise, but let me just lead into that. We in deciding on our negotiation strategy, are we going to collaborate? Are we going to compete? In other words, a competitive or a more mutual gains approach, this might be useful. don't know how familiar you are with the Stephen Covey saying that you always have to begin with the end in mind. So you start off by saying, what is my goal here? Am I buying a second-hand car? In other words, I want to win. I don't care how much money the other side makes or loses. This is about me getting the best car at the best price I can afford. So if that's my goal, then it's going to be a competitive negotiation. So I frame it as a competitive negotiation. My goal is to claim as much value for myself as I can. Everything I claim is lost to the other side. The lower the price, the more they lose. My tactics are distributive. That simply means that I come in with a very low offer, which I justify. I make sure that I have enough alternatives. If I don't get this car, I've got another car I can look at. So I have negotiation leverage or power. And that will help me win the deal I want. The point, though, is that my behavior does not become rude, domineering, aggressive. There's a difference between my tactics and my behavior. Even if I don't care much about the other person, I have to care about my own reputation. The world is a small village. And maybe I have to bring the car back for repairs. And if I left the other person bleeding and feeling mistreated and abused, they will become the aggressor and they will get me back. So my tactics can be very firm, but because I want my own reputation to be upheld and I want to make sure that the deal is sustainable at least, I must be careful how I behave in this negotiation. I don't lie, I don't cheat, I don't bluff, because not only does that undermine my own values, but it also creates a problem for my reputation and my trustworthiness towards the other side. If I'm negotiating in the context of a longer term relationship, sales, B2B agreements, internal negotiations, whenever there's a longer term relationship being forged or that's being continued, I have to switch to more of a mutual gains mindset. My frame now becomes, how do I create as much value for myself out of this by also seeing how much value I can help them create in this process? And that's a far more difficult way of negotiating. If you have leverage, that's great. But often you don't even need that leverage here, except if you really, really have to forge the deal. Because when you're going into that deal, your focus is on working together, understanding each other's interests, looking at all the available options, and then getting into the discussion, as you'll see in a moment. Your tactics here focus more on disclosing more information about concerns, becoming a bit more creative in terms of generating options, but also being quite assertive about the options that ultimately you decide would work best for you. Again, your behavior remains ethical, friendly, courteous, and respectful. Okay. Is there a good general going in strategy in negotiation? And the answer is yes, there is. And first thing is to be flexible, to say, hey, this is like driving a car. When do I use first gear, second gear, third gear, fourth gear, and so on? I have to be flexible, I have to adapt. But ultimately, my choice is between a combination of collaboration and competition, assertiveness and collaboration, assertiveness and accommodation, asserting my own concerns, but trying to accommodate his as best I can. And this could be, I might say, I start my negotiation very collaboratively, saying that my goal is to work with you so that we can both benefit to the fullest extent possible. However, there comes a point where I have to now become more competitive. Now I know what the options are. I assert those options that I think best meet my needs. But it may also be that I start off collaboratively, but that I become very competitive on zero-sum issues like the money issues, and then collaborate again on the issues where I can collaborate. Or it may be that I start very competitively because I have the leverage. I have very clear demands here. I'm very firm on those. And depending on how you respond, I might then switch to a more collaborative strategy. So there's no right or wrong. You've got to think very carefully, what is my goal? What is my best strategy for going into this negotiation? And when do I switch it? If it's a mutual gains outcome you foresee for a longer term relationship, the best is to go in as collaboratively as you can, but to switch to being more assertive on those issues you really care about, or those issues that are truly zero sum, like the money issues. or if the other person is competitive, then you follow a competitive strategy as well. Not to try and beat them, but to actually show them that a competitive strategy might not be the best one for either of the two. Or if the person does not want to become more collaborative, you can always walk away. So I have sent a quote here from Dwight Eisenhower. He used to be the US commander of the Allied forces during the Second World War. Later became US president. And I think this sort of captures the essence of this. You have to be firm on the fundamentals, but flexible in your strategy and tactics. Be firm on your real concerns, the things you care about, but be flexible in how you achieve it and the kinds of concessions that you make. Okay. So I want to take you through a practice just to show the importance of the process, this decision-making process. What does it look like? What are the various stages along this process? I've emailed you just a case. And Christelle, thank you for giving me those email addresses. We're going to do it in small groups. So if you would kindly open your emails, you see the background there. It's just a one-pager. What I'd like you to do is in your groups to read the background information and then to see if you can find a solution here. But don't rush to a final solution. It's more important that you go through the various stages of this process. And let me just explain them to you very briefly. There we have it again, the dimensions, people, problem, process. You always have to manage that throughout, okay? People first. So you have to create the right climate for this discussion. What is the first thing I'm going to say and how do I say it? The science tells us that the way a conversation ends is normally determined within the first 5 minutes of that conversation. So what is my goal? Do I want a conversation or do I want to have a fight? If I want to have a conversation, how am I going to start that? What can I find out about the other person? People like talking about themselves. Ask them questions about themselves. Make sure that there's a good connection. Try to connect at an interpersonal level. Be courteous, be respectful, be as friendly as you normally are. You don't have to wear fake smiles, but at least you can be courteous and respectful. But create the right mood music. You have to start with that people connection first. The next thing is you agree on the process. What are the issues here? How do we tackle them? Do we exchange offers or do we just first of all understand what each other's concerns are and so on? So try to agree on whatever process you want to agree on. It helps to have some ground rules. For example, can we agree that we will first understand each other's concerns, that we will note those, and that we will then start looking at some options before we actually get into negotiating those options? Can we also agree that we will try to negotiate respectfully and not interrupt each other unnecessarily unless we need further information, for example? And can we agree that nothing is agreed until everything's agreed? That we can make suggestions, but that it's only finalized once we're happy with everything. The next phase is understanding what the issues are. And this is where you have to step away from people's demands. I demand so much, you demand so much. Acknowledge those demands. Don't start debating. Are you wrong? This is ridiculous. How can you ask for so much or provide me for so little? First, understand the why. What are your real concerns here? You have to know your concerns first, and then you can ask them about their concerns. Okay? And once you understand the real concerns, make a note of those. Then you say, let's first now see what are the options. It's like designing a menu for people you're inviting to dinner. You don't want airline food, chicken or beef, either or. You want and. As many options as possible without commenting, without criticizing. You just brainstorm. You don't evaluate them. You just note them. Okay, this is an option. This is an option. This is an option. This is an option. If somebody says but, you say no buts. We just generate them. Once we've exhausted the options, then we start bargaining. Then we say, right, which of these options will not work for either of us? And why not? Which of these options might work for you? Which might work for me? And can we combine them? Can we integrate them? Okay, that's the bargaining phase. So it's go slow up to that point. and then go fast. So because once you understand the problem, you understand the menu of options, then you can get much quicker into the bargaining phase and beyond the bargaining phase. And once you think you've got more or less an agreement, don't commit to it. You delay your commitment. You first say, okay, let's evaluate this. Are these options feasible? Are there any other options we might not have thought about, or once we discard it that we can bring back? And if you're all happy with it, well, then you commit to the deal and you close. If you can't reach a deal, then there's no deal. Then you either have to break the deadlock, take time out, bring in a mediator, whatever, or you walk away to your alternative. Okay. So what I'd like you to do is read the Sally Rushdie case, Sally Rushdie, and then keep this picture in mind, maybe take a snapshot of this and try to go systematically through this. Even if you only get to the fourth stage, that's absolutely fine. Don't rush to an agreement. This is really to give you practice in this decision-making process. It's a step-by-step process that involves creating connection, agreeing on the process, then understanding the problem, then looking at solutions before agreeing on the solutions. Okay, are there any questions? The exercise, oops, where is it now? Sally Rushdie. There we go.
Prof,
Melissa?
can I just
Yes.
ask, please, if everybody has received it? I've not received it in my mailbox. I just want to check if we can make a plan to
Let me just check again, Christelle, that it was sent.
maybe put the document in the chat. If there is anybody who...
All right, we just see as Christelle, if your name is there.
Seems as if I have received it.
You did? Okay.
I did not, but it
Okay,
seems as
Christelle.
if other people received it.
Yeah, Christelle, I'll send it to you again. I don't know why not, but there we go, Christelle. It's on its way.
Hanley Boober also asked. It's not the Plato Solar,
No,
it's the new one.
Andy, it's going to you as well.
Sorry, if I can have one as well, please. It didn't come through to mine.
Who's that?
That's Ilse Westerhuizen.
Ilse, sorry, because I'm just looking at my screen here. Ilse Westerhuizen. Is it Ilse.mediation, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, there we go. Anybody else? Anybody else? All right, so if you've taken a screenshot of the process flow, then I'd like you to go into your breakout rooms. I'll just put you into random groups here. Let's say, let's make 7 groups and see. Okay, 7 groups. The rooms are open. And let's take 15 minutes for this discussion. 15 minutes, and then after that, we can wrap up. Okay, the purpose is to say there's a flow to the process, and it's important that one should go through this step by step. And you can actually use this process also when you're dealing with conflict, not necessarily negotiating a deal. It could be negotiating a conflict situation or just a difference of opinion for that matter. You probably would not have reached an outcome, but I'll check in a moment what your outcomes may have been thus far. So again, the important thing is create that relationship. We send signals to people, and they send signals to us. And to a large degree, the response we get is dependent on the signals we send to them. If I'm rude to you, I give you permission to be rude to me. If I disrespect you, I'm giving you permission to disrespect me. If I continuously interrupt you, I'm asking you to do the same to me. Why would I do that to myself? So I've got to lead with the kind of behavior I would expect from others. And if I can do that, it creates some kind of reciprocity. If people then treat me rudely, I can say, look, I didn't accuse you of all sorts of things. I didn't call you names. Please don't do it to me. Or I didn't interrupt you. Can I just finish, please? So you lead with the kind of behavior you want to see them show towards you. Make sure you create an authentic personal connection. You don't have to be suddenly the most social person if you're quite reserved. But then just ask them about themselves, their jobs, what's happening in their business at the moment, how things going. Refer to recent newspaper reports where they were maybe given some sort of accolades. Check their LinkedIn profiles to see if there's any real connection. Don't fake it, but find a real connection, or otherwise just compliment them for allowing you to use their offices for the negotiation. If it's good coffee, for the good coffee. Just create a connection there. If the people side works, the rest becomes a bit easier. Agreeing on the process is great. That is so necessary. And there you can lead it by asking questions. Say, before we start, can I just ask a couple of things? How do you want to tackle this? How do you want to tackle this? And giving them the choice doesn't mean you lose influence. You give them a sense of, they can of being able to make their own decisions, a sense of autonomy. What do you see as the main issues? And you just write them down. You don't prioritize them. You just note them. These are the issues. In what order do you think we should tackle this? But then may I just suggest that we agree just more or less on a couple of process understandings here, so that we make sure this is efficient. I don't know about you, but I don't want to spend too much time doing unnecessary stuff here. I want to be as efficient as possible. So can I suggest we do this and this and this? And then say, okay, what for you are the main concerns here? Or if we've already exchanged ideas or proposals, can I just, before I respond, can I just understand certain things in your proposal? And you ask questions. Don't just come with your counter proposal, because your proposal is going to be different from theirs to a large degree. And then immediately you get caught in an either or positional kind of negotiation. And then you say, okay, these are my ideas. This is what's behind them. It seems like we already have your options and my options. Maybe we can just put those aside and see if there are any further options or combinations of options, and try to create some brainstorming, or even break up the negotiation. Once you've got the information you need about their concerns, then go back and revise or refresh a proposal or draft your proposal for the first time, trying to incorporate not only your main concerns, but theirs as well. And then you can get into the exchange. Now, when it comes to bargaining, we tend to go item by item, money, guarantee, time, etc. We need to negotiate across items and options. We call it log rolling. So, okay, as far as money is concerned, I'm prepared to give you this discount, provided you can give me that on that item. You trade across the different items, okay. And then you take it from there. Now, if you break this down, the Sally Rush Day case, and assuming now you've set your climate, you've agreed more or less on the process, how do you get to understand the actual problem before you even start thinking of creative options? This little diagram could be useful. We refer to it as the PIN diagram, and it stands for positions and interests, needs, or concerns. Positions at the top, needs and interests, or just concerns at the bottom. It's like an iceberg. What we see is the tip of the iceberg. And typically we come in with my demand, you with your demand. Sally comes in with minimum 150K, Billy says minimum 250, and immediately they get locked into positional negotiation, either or. And what we don't realize is that that problem cannot be solved, at least not solved satisfactorily, because you can't have 150 and 250. It's the one, or it's the other, or it's the miserable middle. Every little move to the middle means you're losing. Everything you give up, they take. And that triggers all sorts of psychological things in our brain. We don't want to lose. We start making risky decisions. We become angry because we feel frustrated. I'm trying to solve an unsolvable problem. The solution lies in understanding the real problem. And what is the real problem? Is digging under the surface. Finding out what is it that Sally is really concerned about? What is it that Billy is really concerned about? And what is it that they are both concerned about? What are their common interests and their individual interests? Now, I mean, just a couple here. From Sally's side, she wants to repair her reputation. That is critically important for her. She wants a fair deal here. Instead of saying X amount of money, she wants a fair deal. However, we determine what is fair, even if it means we might get an external expert to tell us what is a fair amount to pay for getting my copyright back. She wants to take care of the environment. She wants to print on environmentally friendly paper. She wants, what I didn't add here, she wants flexibility. If this relationship doesn't work, she wants to get out as cheaply as possible. So she's concerned about whether this can work in the long term. From Billy's side, he wants to grow his little business. He also wants a fair deal. He's also very concerned about the environment and so on. So you've got to unpack these interests. But how do you do that? One option is to ask, to say, Billy, can you tell me what you're really concerned about? You say, well, I don't know you. I don't trust you. Why should I tell you? This is my demand. So you've got to be smarter about it. And one way of doing that is to make a proposal to Billy based on your assumptions about Billy's concerns. And let Billy then shoot it down. He says, no, this is not good enough. She says, why not? Well, because it doesn't help me to grow my business. If I have to pay you so much money, I have nothing to invest in my business. So that is the concern here. Or she might start by saying, Billy, let me play open cards with you. And I'm going out on a limb here, but let me tell you what I really care about. I want my reputation restored. I'm very concerned about ensuring that we are sustainable in my books, when my books are being published and so on. Do you share those concerns? So of course there's a risk that he can take advantage of her, and that's why she's going to manage that process flow as the relationship develops and as she starts feeling comfortable about it. There's another option which I might talk about if we have time, and that is to make multiple equivalent simultaneous offers. Multiple equivalent simultaneous offers. Now, I might say something about that if for those of you who still have time afterwards. Because that can then give an idea of what Billy's main priorities are. But where do you start this discussion? Where do you start? You start with the common ground. You start identifying what they have in common. And immediately what they have in common here is a concern for the environment. Both are probably looking for a longer term relationship rather than just a once-off. So try to identify that. I always think of it as, it's like love in a relationship. It's a great place to start, but the value gets added if you understand the differences and you start understanding and integrating these differences and benefit from these differences. And the same with negotiation. Start with a common ground. And a question you can always ask is, Sally says to Billy, what would an ideal outcome look like to you? And from that answer, she can get a good idea of his priorities, of his goal, of his attitude to this negotiation. Is this a winner-takes-all kind of attitude, or more a question of, I'd like to work together with you? And then the next question is, well, how can we get there? What stands in the way? So the key thing is to understand the underlying interests, okay? And then to talk about your individual interests so that there's a proper understanding of the problem. It's, for those of you who are familiar with it, it's really based on the old story of the two kids arguing over an orange. They fight over the single orange. The parent cuts it in half, gives each half an orange, thinking they're fighting over a position. Each wants the whole orange. That's impossible. So let's cut it in half and keep them both happy. But they're not, because their real concerns were very different. The one wants the skin to bake a cake. The other one wants the juice because that one's thirsty. So the same here. Don't just assume that the positions are the real things to negotiate about. There are stuff underneath that we have to surface. And once we've surfaced those, we can then start looking at options. So can I ask you, if you have reached an agreement, what does it look like? Or what options have you thought of until you were rudely cut short? Anybody? Just come live and
we decided to look at it for the next month, to think on our options, that in general we believe on the same thing. We also do definitely need the publishing, but we still have to work on the bad name of Sally and how we're going to deal with that. And then we'll see each other in a month's time.
Okay, all right. So there's some progress going forward together. That's great. Anybody else? Any other options that you started thinking of?
I have one.
Elisa?
But I must give the credit to Kobus. It was actually his great ideas. we looked at alternative options, perhaps looking at a longer period before she buys back her rights, or perhaps looking at a sliding scale depending on sales, what the buyback price would be.
Okay, so in other words, the more books are being sold, the higher the buyback is going to be, right? Yeah.
Yes, and we basically said, so Billy's position is he wants an income and grow his business where Sally might not actually be able to afford such a high buyback, right?
Yeah.
That's big for her as well.
Okay, all right. Okay, anybody else? All right, I know quite a few of you have to go, so thank you for attending, but as I still have some time, so those of you who want to hang on for a little while longer. Okay, all right, well, let me then formally end off with just a couple of tips, what I call 13 tweaks. Preparation planning, absolutely critical. That is the first thing you need to do. People first, then process before you get to the substance, to the problem. Make the right first moves, create that understanding, that connection. Remember that the way the conversation ends is determined in the first 5 minutes. So make sure you send the right signals about your true intentions and so on. Be flexible in your strategy. Make sure the strategy fits the situation or the person or the issues, depending on which gear you need to move into. Negotiate package deals, not just one for one, but say, okay, Sally, I can give you A, B, and C if you can give me D, E, and F, for example, and integrate the different packages. Always ask yourself, what if there's no deal? What is our best alternative if there's no agreement? In the first exercise, if there's no agreement, there's no money. In this exercise, if there is no agreement, well, then it's the status quo. And if the status quo is better than what is available on the table, then you stick with the status quo. But you don't go with your partner unless you really know that it's not going to get better than it is at the moment. Always take their perspective because they hold the solution to your problem. And how can I satisfy their needs in order to satisfy my own? That idea of selfish altruism. Consider making the first offer if you know what their concerns are. If you can meet at least some of those concerns and you have a good idea of what would be a fair price to ask, for example, if it's a sales situation, go first because that's an anchor. If you don't have that information, hold back and let them go first. Set a very clear goal for yourself. Is my aim to win or is my aim mutual gain? And then use the negotiation balance scorecard to help you fill in the details of your goal. Ignore ultimatums. If people give you ultimatums, ignore them or negotiate them. If they say we have to finish by 5, either just ignore it or say, but let's talk about that. Why should it be 5 o'clock? What if we get so far that we then suddenly have to stop and walk away? Would that be wise? Always speak the truth. That doesn't mean you have to tell them everything, but what you tell them should be true. Then the idea of multiple equivalent simultaneous offers. It involves you giving people 2 or up to 3 choices. From your perspective, any one of these options would be acceptable. You've calculated the risks, the costs, the benefits for you. You say option 1, 2, or 3. I don't care which one they take, but I know for them, there are different value propositions. So option 1, maybe if they want to talk about money, we will give them the best deal we can, money-wise. We'll add some favorable payment terms, and there will be limited room for negotiating along those, but limited room. Secondly, the second option is we give them less money for what it is we buy from them, for example. We give them the beneficial payment terms, but we give them some added value. Maybe I can't buy the house at the price they want, but I can give them a slower amount in cash, and I can let them stay for a further 6 months while they arrange their affairs, finish building the house that they're busy building. Option number 3, I provide them with even less money, but I give them all the added value I can that is low cost to me, but high value to you. Maybe they could stay for a year. It's a bit of a schlep for me, but I can manage for a year, provided they allow me to do some repairs in the meantime. I'll give them a very favorable rental in that period in order to get a lower price. And then I let them decide which one would they like to talk about. But there are some clear ground rules. These are self-contained packages. You cannot negotiate across them, the best of one and the best of 3. They've got to decide which one is the most attractive to them, and then you negotiate further on that package. Now, their choice will give you a very good idea of what their concerns are. If they go for option 3, then you know money is not the only thing here. There are other concerns as well. Okay, so have a look on the internet. There's some very useful tips on using multiple equivalent simultaneous offers. Always ask yourself, what's the backstory? What are their real concerns? Or why are they behaving like this? There's always a reason. It could be fear, it could be uncertainty, it could be not trusting you, it could be just something personal. But we tend to label the person as being a bad individual because we draw conclusions from their bad behavior. There are always explanations for their bad behavior, or for what they say or don't say, or ask for or don't ask for. We have to get to that backstory. Plan your concessions and label them. So if you use if I will you language, if I will give you this, could you give me that? You always do it as an exchange. And what this does, it shows them what they can gain if they reciprocate, but what they stand to lose if they don't. And that could be a very powerful motivator for them. Also label your concessions. They don't know how much this costs you, how valuable this concession is to them. But you might say, you know what, I'm happy to give you this. I just want you to realize that this for us is a very important concession for this and this and this reason. And then you ask for an equally important concession from their side, or an even better concession from their side. Always be constructive in how you tackle the problem. Okay, try to ignore rude behavior, deal with it if necessary, but try to be as constructive as you can. Try not to end with a no. Try not to end with a no. No, you can't have this. If you can, leave them with a little victory at the end. It might mean face saving for them without costing you anything or much. Use productive behaviors and try to lead the process. So from my side, and I'm sorry that I extended my time beyond the time available. Somebody once said to me, that's why you have a mute button, Jordaan, but I can't resist sometimes just talking about things I'm very passionate about. So happy to deal with any questions. I've got a few comments here. People say, how do I get people to share their concerns? Well, apart from asking, the other one is to tell them first what your concerns are and ask them for theirs. The other option is to use this multiple equivalent simultaneous offers to get an idea of what they're really concerned about. Or give them a proposal, and if they say, no, this is not good enough, you ask, why not? They might not tell you why, but they probably will tell you why not. People are quick to criticize. So by telling you why this is not good for them, you can get an idea of what they value. Somebody mentioned undertraining of sales, and that is a problem because you're dealing with people who are perhaps out of their depth. They only focus on the money. They only focus on how good they look back at the office because they get a low price or a high price, whatever. And that's also where a meso can be very useful. So say to them, what I'd like you to do, if you don't have a mandate to settle here, I'd like you to take these 3 proposals to your principal. Have a look at it and tell us which one would be the most attractive for you, because that opens up their thinking too. You say, hey, we can talk money, but maybe we lose added value. So why don't we rather look at the added value? If they say, forget about the added value, it's only money, then it's going to be a hard bargaining positional negotiation, of course. What about counter proposals? You make a proposal, they make a counter proposal. Don't just respond with your counter proposal. Rather, sorry, the noises. House has been cleaned, so unfortunately you'll have to live with that for a little while. Don't just respond with an immediate counter offer. First, find out what's behind it. Could you explain this to me? I don't quite understand this. Hold back on your counter offer if you can as well. Don't just respond. First, understand, because chances are that you will respond with something different and immediately you are into an either or positional kind of situation. If they insist on talking money, Sally says, I want to talk money first before everything else. Then Billy can say, look, okay, Sally, that's not the way I wanted to play this. But let me tell you where the figure comes from. You always give your explanation first. Let me tell you where I get my figure from. And then Billy gives his figure, but immediately adds, I would prefer, though, that we don't get stuck on that for now. Let's first see what other value there might be for both of us before we get back to the money issues. So try to divert them away from that, okay? Because money anchors, and in negotiation, there's nothing as emotional as money. So you have an emotional anchor on the one side and an emotional anchor on the other side, and that's not good. And then how do you ensure that the process is followed? You get commitment to the process rules right at the start. You don't have to call them rules. You say, can I suggest some guidelines for us in this process? And you can say, I prefer us to be as efficient as possible. I don't know what your timing is like, but time is always not on our side. So I'd like us to be efficient as possible. And if you share that concern, maybe we can talk about how we can achieve that. What do you have in mind? Well, I suggest that we look at what are the issues. We then agree on the order for discussing. And then we just maybe agree on how we're going to communicate with each other. In my experience, if everybody talks at the same time, it's not productive. So perhaps we can agree that we will not interrupt each other unless we need clarity. Perhaps we can agree that if any options are being tabled, they should not be seen as firm proposals, but just as ideas. And then you can always hold people to that. So, you know what, we did agree that we won't latch onto a suggestion that others make. We will see them as proposals and not as firm offers. So could we just stick to our understanding? So you can always bring them back to their rules. People like to behave consistently. And if they've promised to behave in a certain way, you can always bring them back to that promise. Okay? All right. I think I have spoken way too much. Are there any other questions, perhaps, or inputs or comments from your own experience that you'd like to throw in?
I've asked one question, Prof.
Yes, Elisa.
If you don't mind. I just want to ask, I remember from your training that you gave us in class that you need to bank almost a decision in order not to reverse it later. But how do you balance that with being flexible and looking at options? Should that decision perhaps not be applicable anymore? I don't know.
So I missed the first part. Would you mind just repeating that?
So I just want to ask, if you said to us we need to bank a decision and almost minute it so that it doesn't get reversed later, and then all the work that you've done with your negotiations doesn't get lost. How do you balance that with being flexible and looking at new options?
Did I say it in those terms?
Maybe not.
No, he said nothing is agreed until everything's agreed. In other words, if there's an option, well, there are two things. You and I are still talking about what are the concerns and so on, and suddenly you pop up with an option. You say, okay, there's an option. I should make a note of that, not get engaged in, hey, but okay, that's an option, because then we might dive into that option. So you just note that option, process-wise, we'll come to the options later, but I don't want this option to get lost. So I say, listen, that's a potential option. I'm just going to note it. We can come back to it later. But, excuse me, once you have these options on the table, then you need to be able to negotiate across these options. Okay, if I could give you this on item 1, could you give me that on item 6? That creates flexibility. The fact that we've both agreed on item 1 doesn't mean that is cast in stone. It is a preliminary agreement on that item. That's why nothing is agreed until everything is agreed. So we might come to item 5, and I now say, look, okay, I thought about it again. I'm happy to give you what you want on item 1. But then I want to take back what I suggested there and rather give you this. Now you say, oh, but you can't go back on your word. I said, I never gave you my word. We agreed that nothing is agreed until everything is agreed, that we will remain flexible. So we can always change what we've suggested in order to get the best deal. So that's where the flexibility comes in. But you don't say that thing is signed off. We agreed on the price and that's it. We don't go back to the price, because then you just create more and more inflexibility as you go along with the negotiation. You want to keep it open, able to revisit if necessary to make a concession elsewhere. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank
All
you,
right.
Barney.
Thank you all. Thank you, Kalani, for the initiative, Christelle for all the arrangements, and everybody in the back room there, Vincent and others, Lizelle and so on. Much, much appreciated.
Shana. Thank you to everyone. I'll hand over to Kalani to say a final thank you to everyone. Thank you so much.
Yes, thanks, Christelle. First, I'd like to thank Prof for making a time to come and give us this presentation.
My pleasure.
I'm sure all of us have learned a lot now about the process flow of negotiations, and we've gained some tips on how to prepare ourselves for the negotiations. I also like to thank everyone who has connected, for everyone who has supported this event. Say thank you to everybody. Thanks. Over to you, Christelle.
All right, there's nothing more from me. Barney, we highly value your time to spend an entire morning with us. Thank you very much, all the way from Fleurick. We're looking forward to a next opportunity.